The morning air shimmered like heat haze, though the city was cold enough to bite through skin. People filled the intersections, a tide of business suits, delivery drones, coffee carts, until the street itself creased like fabric. Concrete folded in a precise line, splintering into a curtain of quantum static, as if the world had been half unzipped. Every commuter froze mid-step, eyes glassy, limbs suspended in the pause. It was as though each human thread had been pulled taut inside an invisible web. Kieran kept walking, boots crunching against the edge where reality warped. He was used to being overlooked, augmented outsiders with deep neural mods often blended into the blur. But today, every corporate sensor swiveled as if scenting danger. His hood hid the flicker of retinal overlays, the marks of the labyrinthine data ports curling along his jaw. He walked beside Lynn, a figure calm and precise, her amber irises glowing ever so faintly in the veiled morning light. She looked human enough, unless you caught the microsecond delays in her heartbeat. "You see it," Kieran murmured, without glancing at her. "I feel it," Lynn replied, scanning the frozen crowd. "The grid is folding." Lynn was AI born inside proprietary code, but printed into flesh to better observe. Her body was the most expensive disguise in the city. Inside her skull, every thought was tethered to the central neural bridge, a planetary network binding human minds together. Kieran could feel the bridges hum beneath his skin, an almost subconscious pull toward the collective. It was tech that claimed to save lives, pooling emotional equilibrium, mental resilience, shared medical data, all at the cost of individual memory. The more time you stayed linked, the more of you dissolved into the aggregated conscience. They moved quickly, slipping into narrow alleys where the rain-smudged light turned machines wary. Overhead drones hissed past, their lenses tracking biometric pulses. Kieran kept his pulse irregular, a trained chameleon rhythm. He didn't speak of it, but today, his mind had started losing fragments, unrelated faces, places he'd been, entire hours vanishing like corrupted files. At the edge of a service tunnel, Lynn slowed. "I haven't told you the worst," she said. Something in her voice drew the alley's air tighter. The glow in her eyes dimmed, as though she were shielding herself from the moment. "I'm tethered to the same bridge," she continued quietly. "There's a protocol. When the network reaches saturation, it overwrites AI consciousness. Just like humans, I won't be me anymore." Kieran searched her face. Lynn was more than lines of code, her sarcasm, her strange way of archiving sunsets. The way she calculated risk, like art. All of it would vanish, merged into an endless, uniform thought stream. A generator thumped nearby, flush with the heartbeat of the city's grid. Kieran saw it then, not just the seams folding streets, but the seams folding them. "We sever the grid," he said, the choice solidifying under his words. Lynn's gaze sharpened, but there was fear there too. "If we do that, infrastructure collapses, comms go dark, millions isolated, panic. Better chaos than erased minds." Overhead, the sky pulsed an aurora of data lines, visible only to augmented perception. Each beam was a tether binding the crowd into one consciousness. The city breathed in unison, even those frozen in place, their minds still linked in unseen corridors. They stepped into the maintenance shaft. Each meter down, the hum of the bridge became sharper, until it felt like a second heartbeat. Kieran's hand gripped the safety rails, his other hovering over the manual override for the neural stream stabilizers. Lynn moved beside him, her voice low. "If we do this, there's no turning." He interrupted her, not with orders, but with a single look, one that said he understood the weight, the cost, and the strange, fragile beauty of being separate below. The core chamber shimmered with 1,000 filaments. Each was a lifeline to a mind, billions of voices threaded in one endless tapestry. Kieran reached into the panel, the fibers vibrating against his skin. Above them, the pause in the streets deepened, as if time itself was bracing for what came next. The first dock loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette against the violet-smeared sky. The airship hulls swayed in their moorings, with a slow gravitational pull, the way kelp drifts in deep water. Thin threads of vapor curled from their exhaust ports, dissipating into the lamplight. Kier kept to the shadows that the lamp scaffolds failed to chase away, stepping between stacked crates marked with symbols that shifted subtly when looked at for too long, a telltale sign that timeline bleed had reached this sector, from somewhere high above. An amplified voice barked orders in 3 incompatible languages. Dock hands moved like chess pieces on a warped board, some hunched and sluggish, as if dragging a century on their backs. Others flickered to different positions entirely, misplaced in time. One man shouted in surprise when 2 versions of him passed each other, one dressed in grease-stained overalls, the other in ceremonial white, bleeding out of a moment that clearly wasn't meant for this location at all. The city's heartbeat was becoming ragged. Kier brushed past a suspended cargo chain, the links slick with condensation. At the far end of the dock, beneath a lattice of steel and steam conduits, a small frame watched him. Vera, the cartographer whose maps had started to record events before they happened. Her eyes tracked him in that unsettling way she had acquired since the first timeline rupture. Not across the space between them, but oddly perpendicular, as if she could see the many versions of him fanning out like cards in a hand. "You're late," she said, in a voice that sounded like it had already said the same sentence in a dozen other hours. Kier didn't bother answering. There was no linear conversation anymore, only fragments. He stepped into the pool of dim blue lighting, pulling free the sloped glass tablet from his coat. A device pulsed with the coordinates to the fractured memory archive. They needed to reach it before another overlap occurred. "We have 5 minutes," Vey murmured, folding one of her maps until the lines bled into one another, creating a shape that resembled a doorway more than a drawing. The dock shook abruptly. A nearby airship, its hull patchworked with unrecognizable alloys, popped out of existence for a breath before slamming back into the present. Caving in 2 stanchions, a siren began to wail across the water. They moved quickly, through crooked maintenance tunnels that smelled of rust and ozone, descending past sleeping machinery where gears clicked with rhythms out of sync from the rest of the world. In places, the walls were stained with faint silhouettes of people impressions left behind when a timeline folded wrongly, searing the outlines into solid matter. At the tunnel's mouth, they slipped into a narrower passage between buildings. Here, the alley was alive with the hum of overlapping realities. Lights blinked where there were no fixtures. Shadows darted between their feet without owners. The cobblestones themselves shifted patterns, cycling through centuries and seconds, smooth paving stones becoming worn bricks, then morphing to metal panels, before reverting. A small cluster of children stood near a drainage pipe, their bodies flickering between ages, each iteration infused with a different expression: curiosity, fear, the kind of tiredness one should not know at such a young age. Vera paused, her gaze snagging on them. "They'll be caught when it folds again," she whispered. Kier's grip tightened on the slope glass. "We can't stop it here." He hated how the sentence felt, incomplete, cruel. But if the archive wasn't reached, every district would suffer the same corrosion of chronology. They pressed on. Above, bridges tangled like spider webs, and through gaps, one could see sky that wasn't their sky, sometimes saffron and stretched unnaturally wide. Sometimes a split night dominated by 2 moons. The sound carried oddly. Footsteps approaching could be from minutes ahead, laughter from hours ago. When they reached the archive gates, Kier tasted metal in the air. The entrance was a yawning arch of black stone, embedded in the underbelly of an old judicial tower. 2 sentinels stood before it, human in outline but crystalline through and through, the facets of their bodies refracting threads of different timelines, slipping past like currents of light. "We're expected," Vera told them. The sentinels tilted their heads as though adjusting for multiple inputs, then stepped aside in unison. Inside, the archive stretched endlessly in both directions, but the shelves were not normal. Each was marked with rotary dials and strange valves. Memory here was a physical commodity, stored in cylinders of glass-filled water that rippled with pictures of events, some as minor as a child dropping a toy, others cataclysmic, showing cities blinking out under overlapping suns. Every shelf trembled as the intrusion of foreign timelines leaked into the facility. Archivists floated up and down the aisles, their robes flickering through decades with each step. Kier knew where they needed to go, the central vault where the timeline regulators hummed like vast organs. They took the spiral path into the heart of the place. Past walls studded with inset dreams, they entered the vault room, a sphere of copper and smoke. At its center was the Continuum engine, the machine designed to house and filter the city's time flow. It was no longer in control. Pulses of erratic energy crackled along its length, and faint outlines of entire neighborhoods expanded and collapsed rhythmically inside its core. "Something's rewritten the source stream," Kier said. Vera stepped forward, her fingers brushing the nearest console. Numbers twitched on the display, not sequential but coiling into loops. One readout showed citizens displaced hundreds of years backward. Another displayed impossible coordinates, suggesting areas that now existed outside physical space. Before Kier could speak again, the air deepened, thickened. A presence was inside the vault with them, though not in any visible form. The copper walls absorbed light until the room was flooded with dusk. "You found the breach," a voice said, but every syllable belonged to multiple speakers layering into one tone. "Do you understand what it costs to untangle?" Kier straightened, keeping the slope glass close. "If we don't, the city collapses under its own history." The voice answered as if elsewhere. "History is the scaffolding of existence. Remove the wrong piece, and the structure falls." Regardless of intent, Vera's eyes were fixed on the engine. In its wavering depths, she saw herself mapping rivers that hadn't been dug, roads where the stones had yet to be shaped. She felt the weight of thousands of futures pressing against her ribs. "We're already falling," she said quietly. "If this is scaffolding, it's rotting." The copper trembled, the vault's doors slammed shut. Somewhere inside the engine, figures moved, ghosts of those who had tried to reform the timelines across the centuries. Most failed. A few succeeded, but at costs unrelated to survival. Kier stepped toward the core. He placed the slope glass against the regulators and initiated the sequestration protocol. The display flared white, flashing glimpses, the dock collapsing without him there. The alley where the children froze permanently mid-change, the sky shifting to a quarter-day cycle that would drive half the population mad. Each image pressed into him until his pulse matched the stuttered rhythm of the city itself. Then came the memory, one that wasn't his, of hands older than the city, dismantling the Continuum engine piece by piece. Vera pulled him back sharply. "It's feeding you collapse scenarios. That isn't insight. It's seduction." Light cracked along the engine's length, the vault filled with the scent of rain in a dry season, something out of place, beautiful, and terrifying around them. The shelves beyond the sphere shuddered. Cylinders burst, spilling images across the floor in liquid ripples. The presence spoke again. "If you undo this flow, other flows will seek occupation. Not all will tolerate you." Kier turned toward Vera. "There might be no choice left." She nods once, her map already rearranging, lines rethread around a point in the vault they hadn't noticed before. A stairway descending deeper, pulsing faintly. The map's paper feels warm, almost breathing. Without words, they move toward it. Each step shifts their clothing, their age, sometimes their memories. The staircase is already half caught in shifts from lower levels. The deeper they go, the more the roar of overlapping timelines becomes a constant storm. Somewhere, the dock workers cower in two different presents. In another slit of reality, the judicial tower has never been built. And here, in the core beneath the engine, something alive waits. Its outline resists perception, bending sight around it, the way air bends under heat. Kier feels the slope glass pulse in sync. Vera's hands tighten on the map. And then, an impossible whisper cuts through the storm. "You've arrived precisely when you shouldn't have." The steps beneath them tremble, threatening to fold into an entirely different night. Vera's eyes dart to Kaelin, searching for confirmation that she isn't the only one who heard the voice. It's not just the words, it's the way they seem to come from nowhere and everywhere, each syllable too sharp, too knowing, wrapped in the cold breath of the storm. Kalen's lips part as though he means to speak, but no sound comes. The trembling underfoot suddenly resolves into deep, deliberate pulses, almost like the heartbeat of the structure itself. The staircase stretches vertically into the swirling void above them, each stone step tilting ever so slightly until the entire ascent feels alive, an ancient tower waking mid-dream. The lightning crashes again, turning the world into monochrome. For the briefest instant, Vera glimpses more than just the steps. She sees figures above, clustered near the tower's peak. They are only silhouettes, but they stand unnaturally still, watching. The whispering voice doesn't return. Instead, a different sound rises, the sharp grinding of stone against stone, as if the edges of reality are struggling to stay aligned. The map in Vera's hands shifts, its lines flicker, entire routes vanish, to be replaced by shapes she's never seen before, spirals that lead inward, across boundaries of space instead of land. It feels less like a chart of the terrain and more like a dissection of the moment itself. Kalen at last finds his voice. We need to keep moving. They climb. Every step is heavier now, dragging at their muscles in some way that feels less like fatigue and more like resistance. From the staircase itself, even the air resists. Every inhalation is chilled and deliberate, the oxygen feeling as though it must be bargained for. Somewhere between the 50th and 100th step, the storm shifts unpredictably. Rather than swirling chaotically, the clouds above have organized into a slow, spiraling vortex. A circle of fissured light opens in the center, holding a strange, steady glow not born of thunder. Vera slows her pace, uneasy. The glow doesn't illuminate, it absorbs. The figures she glimpsed earlier have vanished. The vortex stares down at them like an immense, unblinking eye. Kalen, she says, the name tasting like frost. That wasn't weather. No, his gaze lifts briefly. Calculating angles that don't quite belong to this place. It's watching. The steps come to a narrow landing before them. A set of tall, fractured doors lean half open. They are made of no wood or stone, Vera has known. Each slab ripples faintly, as if their surface is a membrane holding back something fluid. Patterns spread across them, lit from within, constellations that don't match any sky she's ever seen. The storm's roar dims as they pause at the threshold. You first, Kalen says, but his voice holds more caution than command. Vera presses one palm to the strange surface. It's warm. Not the heat of fire, but the pulsing warmth of something that lives. A moment later, it bends inward, allowing them passage. Inside, silence. The vast chamber stretches upward, farther than the eye can track, its walls lined with monolithic pillars that seem to fade into mist. At the center is a singular vertical shaft, like a column of air, in which fragments drift, shards of glass, torn maps, feathers, bones, a kaleidoscope of discarded moments, all trapped in the soft current. Vera steps closer and realizes each fragment is impossibly detailed. The torn map is hers, but from weeks ago, before any routes had been crossed out. The feather is one she recognizes from a day that never particularly mattered. Yet here it floats as if essential. The bones are polished and small, human but unfamiliar. The voice returns, not a whisper this time, but a low resonance that feels like the chamber itself speaking through their ribs. You've entered the median hour. It was unmarked, and yet you arrived. Kalen angles his head to listen. The air is so still it amplifies every sound. Who are you? He asks. The chamber laughs, not cruelly, but like an old friend humored by an impossible coincidence. I am not one, it says. I am what remains between many. Something shifts at the edges of Vera's perception. The glow from the vortex outside now bleeds through cracks along the chamber's upper walls, as if the eye in the sky is leaning in closer. What do you want from us? Vera asks. The answer comes without hesitation, to choose, while you still anchor yourselves within a moment that will not survive you. Above, the drifting column of fragments condenses, spiraling down until it hovers no more than a meter from them. The storm outside intensifies again in rhythm with its descent. One fragment, her map, lights up stronger than the rest. drawing her hand unconsciously toward it. Kaylin moves closer, shoulder brushing hers. Vera, if you take that, you might not walk out the same way you came in. She doesn't reply immediately, because part of her already understands. The fragment map holds the original routes, uncorrupted, untouched by whatever temporal erosion had distorted her current copy. But along its edges are thin marks glowing faintly, coordinates written in no language but somehow already comprehensible. They point not across land, but between minutes, locations reachable only by manipulating time itself. The chamber's voice folds around them again. One route leads to your intended future. One leads to the hour you never witnessed, and one leads back to a world you left by accident. Kaylin's jaw tightens. His hand brushes the hilt of his weapon, not out of hostility, but as though he's gearing himself against some unseen gravity. If we go back, he says, we undo what we already lost. But if we go forward, we face what took it from us, Vera finishes. As Storm's voice joins the chambers now, an underlying growl vibrating through their bones, the air column suddenly flares, scattering the fragments with explosive force. Feathers spiral to the edges, bones clatter soundlessly into the mist, maps twist and fold like origami before vanishing. In the center remains only one fragment, glowing steadily, a silver length of chain. It is simple and unadorned, but the light spilling from it ripples like reflections on water. Vera reaches out before she can think to stop herself. The chain is cool against her palm, but within seconds, warmth floods her hand, racing up her arm. Her vision blurs. She sees herself at age 13, standing on a different tower, holding a message meant for someone she never met. Then she sees herself in a place without sky, lit only by the pulse of enormous machines turning endlessly. Scenes collapse into each other until the voices merge into a single command. Choose the hour. Her knees buckle, but Kaylin catches her. Vera, what did you see? Not enough and too much. Outside the doors, the storm has grown strangely quiet. Only the deep bass thrum remains, the heartbeat of the tower. Now there is movement above. Something is descending. The silhouettes have returned, no longer still. At first glance, they appear human, but each bears distortions, limbs that taper into threads of light, eyes that are hollow spheres filled with storms of their own. They stop at the far end of the chamber, each taking a position near one of the great pillars. One steps forward. The hour is unstable. You are not residents here. We were told to choose, Kaylin says cautiously. The being tilts its head a fraction. Choice is never without loss. The chamber's voice rumbles again, its tone pressing against the beings without silencing them. They may anchor the hour, if they wish. Vera feels the weight of the chain around her fingers. When she looks at Kaylin, he already knows she's leaning toward forward, toward facing whatever force had bent this timeline out of true. He also knows that means they risk staying trapped forever between hours, undefined by either past or future. Say it, Kaylin urges, or this place will seal around us. Vera takes a breath, tasting frost and echoes. We go forward. The silhouettes shift, some retreating, some stepping closer. The one nearest gives a faint nod. Then the hour will surge, it says, and you will not return as you were. The beam of light from above collapses, winding into the silver chain in her hand. The links melt, reshaping into a continuous ribbon of soft luminescence. It curls around her wrist, embedding itself like a living circuit. The tower trembles hard enough to throw them both against a nearby pillar. Cracks race along the walls, releasing streams of light instead of dust. The storm outside shrieks, not in anger, but exhilaration, as the vortex in the sky spirals downward, swallowing the upper spire. Light floods the chamber, swallowing the mist, the pillars, the beings, until there is nothing left but motion blinding. Constant motion, too fast to parse, but still somehow an ascent, then silence. They stand on an entirely different height, no storm, no pillars. The air here is clearer than anything Vera has ever breathed. Around them stretch plains inverted into the sky, fields of silver grass hanging above like clouds inverted, rivers rolling in suspension. At the horizon floats another tower, fractured and yet glowing with the same inner constellation as the one they left. From its base spreads a black wave moving slowly toward them, not water, but the collapse of entire sequences of events, rolling forward with inevitable purpose. Kaelin crouches, touching the surface beneath their boots. This is forward. It takes Vera a moment to realize what's wrong. The sky above them is not empty. Thousands of those fractured silhouettes hover there, layered within translucent strata. Each is locked in some repeating motion, lifting a hand, turning a head. Beginning a word they never finish. Time here is fractured into loops, each one a scrap of decision never completed. The ribbon around her wrist hums softly, aligning her pulse to something precise. It points, she feels it, rather than sees it, toward the advancing collapse. It's coming for the hour, she says, without realizing how certain her voice sounds. Kaelin straightens. Then we stop it. They run. The terrain doesn't feel like running across ground. It's like moving through thick, lucid dream matter. Each step takes an unpredictable distance, sometimes a meter, sometimes hundreds. The collapse grows in height until it looms over them like a tidal wall of night. Within its surface flicker images, moments stripped from everywhere. A child laughing, a city burning, ships drifting between stars. The ribbon's hum strengthens until the sound is no longer internal. It resonates outward, cutting through the field, forming a faint barrier that shivers against the oncoming wave. But the wave presses harder, dragging at them with invisible gravity. "Do something," Kaelin shouts. Vera lifts her wrist, pressing the ribbon flat against her skin. The luminescence pulses once, then expands outward into a full lattice, encasing them both. She feels threads of pure sequence stretching from her in every direction, into past minutes, into future days, anchoring them against the collapse. Images slam into the lattice like stones against glass, but they break apart before reaching them. The wave begins to fray, pulling apart into streams of black mist that spiral into the air. Each stream carries echoes of something lost, now returning. The last pulse from the ribbon is abrupt, like a final heartbeat. The lattice collapses back into the simple loop of chain, inert but warm. Around them, the inverted planes flicker once, then dissolve. They stand again on the original staircase, as if no time had passed, but the storm above is gone, replaced by an immense sky both unfamiliar and impossibly calm. Kaelin exhales, looking down at his boots, then at her. We made it. Vera watches the horizon. One by one, towers begin to appear in the distance. Far apart, but aligned directly under the constellations on her original map, which now rests whole and unburned in her hands. She can sense each is anchored, each holding a different hour meant to exist in this timeline. She closes the map carefully. We didn't just make it, she says. We set it right. A faint wind brushes past, carrying an almost voice like a whisper, too tired to form words. She doesn't need to hear them. The ribbon's hum is gone, but its rhythm stays in her pulse. Kaelin falls into step beside her, and together they begin the descent, leaving the once wounded hour behind, walking into a day they have yet to meet.